because crops like this they got to be green, right? You don't like yellow lettuce in your salad, right? So they usually get more than enough nitrogen, and some of that nitrogen's lost in leaching and actually is in the groundwater. And so we've sort of evolved over these 20 years from working with like Tim Hart's on the soil nitrate quick test to also incorporating irrigation management, because nitrate moves very quickly in the soil profile. And so even though you may have sufficient nitrogen today, you irrigate too much and that nitrate goes below the root zone. And so we tried extending our information with grower meetings, demonstration trials, but ultimately talking with Jorge's boss, Mark Mason, we realized, no, we need somebody to interact with the irrigators that's really educated on this area and can sort of be a coach with them. And that's the role Jorge has been playing, right?
Yes.
And, when you first got here, they didn't want to listen to you, right?
They didn't want to listen to me because I was new coming from Fresno, so I didn't know. They thought I didn't know anything about irrigation. But now we're working more with them, and they start listening more to us with the trials we do. Back then, we used to have a lay flat at the end, and there was no pressure out there at the other end. Maybe here will be like 8 psi, and out there maybe how much? Like 2 psi. There was not a lot of pressure. But now, by doing trials, been putting lay flats in the middle, and now they're putting lay flats in the middle. So I think it's working.
Yeah, and basically like just where they put that lay flat had a big effect on the uniformity of the system. The other was they would run this at a very low pressure, so they wouldn't open the valve all the way because of various reasons. But one concern was if they had any leaks, they show if you have the pressure up.
Yeah.
And also, if they turn on sprinklers somewhere else, the pressure surges, and that could cause a surge in the drip tape pressure. So why don't you talk about the pressure regulators there, Jorge?
So been using regulators maybe this year, last year?
Yeah, it started demonstrating them last year.
Demonstrating last year. Back then they used to have some regulators, I don't know, Michael. They used to have, but I think they didn't know how to.
Well, they didn't work well.
They didn't work well.
Yeah.
So now we have this regulator.
I'm going to
try to solve it. Thank you. Good.
So there's three types of lay flats that we use. One is a white lay flat that it takes about 20 psi.
Yeah.
And a blue lay flat that it takes like 40 psi, maybe. And this one, red lay flat, it takes 110 psi. So this one takes a lot of pressure. So you could open your valve like at 80 psi, and it could handle the pressure.
Yeah, so when the sprinklers are running somewhere else, the pressure in this valve will be like 80 psi. And so even though we found a really nice pressure regulator, we couldn't get the irrigators to open the valve all the way because they were worried the lay flat would break. And so then they were still regulating with this valve. So this was a little innovation that Mark Mason found, and Jorge. Just this red lay flat gives the irrigators the confidence they can open that valve all the way and let that regulator there do the regulation. So if the water pressure drops, it automatically opens and lets more flow. If the pressure surges up, it closes. And we have data that shows, when you set this to 10 psi, no matter what happens upstream, it holds it at 10 psi. And that really helps with a lot of different aspects to irrigation management, because if you have pressure varying all the time, it's very hard to schedule. So even though you use Crop Manage, to figure out you should run it for 5 hours, it's sort of a guess because you don't know what the irrigators are going to do for pressure. If you have a low pressure, you put less water out per hour, and if you have higher pressure, you put more water out per hour. So just the regulator helps with that, and you want to optimize the pressure to get the best uniformity out of your drip system. And so when we did some uniformity evaluations, and when it was at 5 psi here, there was almost no pressure at the end, and the uniformity was, out of 100 being perfect, we'd get maybe 70% or 69% uniformity. When we bring it up to 10 psi and keep it consistent, we get over 90% uniformity. I think one of the celery fields, we got like 92%.
92.
And that's what drip should be able to do. But unfortunately, everyone says, great, we got drip, we're doing the best we can, but if you don't manage it right, it's no better than sprinklers or furrow systems, right? So
with the irrigation, you always have to have a pressure gauge, so you know.
I think I got it. Go ahead.
Yes. Did you hear me now? On irrigation, you have to have a pressure gauge so you can know what's happening with the irrigation. So with the pressure gauge, with the regulator, Michael said upstream.
I can hold this for you.
With upstream, when he means upstream is this, you check the pressure out here, the pressure, and it gives you the high PSI up there, which is maybe you put it at 80 PSI, 60 PSI, and when downstream is the pressure, is gonna go over there. So with this, I don't know, you could see there's something you could adjust. So how much PSI you want to?
Yeah, so this has a pilot, so you can change what pressure you want, so you can set it. And one of the things was we wanted to find a pressure regulator that was very easy for these guys to use. And this one's from Nelson. It's their 800 series. It works really well. It's a little different than normal pressure regulators that have these, what they call bonnets on them. It's all internal. This thing that opens and closes in there. And talk about, Jorge, this is a little different. This pressure gauge, you see at the bottom, has a Schrader adapter. And maybe explain why we use, instead of having a lot of pressure gauges all over the field, why do we use just, one pressure gauge like this with Schraders?
So you could know the pressure.
Yeah, maybe talk.
So you could know the pressure that's going out there.
Yeah, so we can put these, just like these bicycle valves, on your bicycle tube. If you can't come later, you can look at this, but they're just little Schrader valves, like on your bicycle. And in that way, what we found was a lot of these pressure gauges, even you buy them new, they're off by 1 or 2 PSI. So it's really important if you want to, this is running at 10 PSI to get your pressure measurement accurate. And so we actually calibrate the gauge. And then with the Schraders at different locations, right, we use the same pressure gauge. So we're comparing apples and apples here. But if you had a bunch of different pressure gauges, this one might read 10 here, but read 13 here, because they'll be off maybe by 3 PSI. Yeah.
And we have this type of pressure gauge and this type of pressure gauge. So you could go check and the lay flat in the middle to check the pressure, what's going on, or at the end, so you could check the pressure. So having a good pressure out here is gonna give you a good pressure at the end. So this regulators does help a lot, but it's been helping a lot for the foreman. Now, back then, they had a little bit of pressure, and they would water a lot. Mm-hmm. So now, with this regulators, they water, but not with a lot of hours. With the high pressure and uniformity, good uniformity, you're gonna get it like a good water.
Yeah, so it ends up uniform, and then they irrigate less hours. The other savings in labor is before, without the pressure regulator, they would open up a valve on another block, and then they would dash back to close this one, or vice versa. And so they were always going back and forth with their little carts, you know, to adjust all the valves by hand. This is all automatic. So it's saving on labor. They can actually manage more fields this way.
And then can you manage it remotely as well? Is that what that little tower is for?
That's what it sends the data to crop manage.
Yeah. So this is a flow meter here. It's a magnetic meter, and so it's monitoring the flow. So they don't do this on every site, but for your class, we put this here. So you could follow it on crop manage, right?
Yep.
So every time it irrigates, this that data logger there is recording every 2 minutes what the flow rate is. And then inside there is and I can open that up, but a cell phone modem that's connected to the data logger, and there's the antenna there, but it essentially you know, goes into the cloud, into crop manage, and crop manage analyzes the data, and you see the irrigation, you can see the flow rate and everything. So this is not done in every field, but it's done as a way to coach the irrigation foremen, the irrigators, so they can see and give them feedback about how they're doing, if that makes sense. So we realize this is a pretty expensive process, you know, to put all this equipment out, but if you really want to work with the irrigators, you can't just come here and say, looks like you're over irrigating. You need data. And so this gives us the data, and the software does all the analysis, so I used to have to hire a person to analyze all that flow meter data. Now we just let a computer do it on Amazon Web Service. So it's all in the cloud. So that's been very convenient. And then we looked at this and said, gosh, it's a lot of work to set all this up. So when we go to the
Callahan.
yeah, we're going to go to Callahan's equipment yard. You're going to see a new type of trailer that we've developed to put all this together so you can just wheel it out to the field.
Right now, just reality check. Any questions for these two guys? Yeah, very quickly. Go ahead.
Was the real trick here making sure that, what do you call this green thing? It's right here. What's
That's
that?
a valve opener.
Making sure that the valve and then this line can both handle the same PSI. Is that right? Was that the real trick to getting the flow?
So with us at the pumps, there's a pump over there. We put the pump at 80 PSI. So you open it all the way, it's gonna be 80 PSI. So always we're gonna have a good leaf flat like this one in order for us to open that valve more. Because if we have like that blue leaf flat, it takes like 40 PSI, they're not gonna open it because it's gonna do it like a big old mess.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they
Back, we had a trial going on last year. We had that problem, and they didn't want to open it, but the leaf flat was about to explode.
Yeah, that's insane. 80 to 40 PSI.
Yeah.
So yeah, it would explode. That's nuts.
Right. Yeah, so all those little details matter. You know, it was not enough to just get a nice pressure regulator. Then the question was, okay, where are you going to position that, and how are you going to connect it to the valve?
So speaking of the attention to detail, big picture, what has this coaching and training, what has it impacted? What are the benefits here that you
Yeah.
track?
Well, so, for example, earlier in this year, we did a trial just like this over at Callahan, 41.5 and 6. And, you know, before, I had we had recorded as much as 3.5, 4 feet of water put on celery because they would drip irrigate it. Well, first start off with sprinklers to establish the transplants. And this, by the way, was planted in August 6, I think. And then they would put the drip tape out at a certain point, but then they would come in with furrow irrigation. Drip and furrow, and sometimes throw the sprinklers in. And so, because they always said celery needs to be really wet. So what we did was we showed them, if you run drip correctly, if you run drip correctly with the correct scheduling, you can run it, you can irrigate celery all the way to finish, all the way to harvest with just drip and save a lot of water. So we grew that crop, I think, on 22 inches or so of water. We got it to harvest, and it looked beautiful. And so, and in that way, we end up using less nitrogen fertilizer too. Yes?
I'm curious what like this part of this setup is and why you can't just connect.
Right. This is what we call a screen filter, and so these are moved on little trailers like this because they're sort of heavy to move around. But that removes any debris that's in the water because these drip emitters are very small and they would clog up. So you always have to have a filter station before your drip. Some people filter at the at the well, and but that's not always the case. So just in case, they filter here. I don't know if you want to add anything on.
No, you almost.
Yeah. So these are, you can open it up at the end, and you'll see a screen. It's like, they call them sock filters too, because it's just a mesh like sock that's on a frame, and the water moves through there, and it's about I think it's like 100 mesh type of filter. That's mesh is, you know, how many little holes there are per inch. So it'd be like 100 per inch. And also, when you fertilize, you want to fertilize, put the liquid fertilizer in before the filter.
Out here, put it out here.
Yeah. So they.
Attach the insert the fertilizer here?
They don't have it on this one, but on the new trailers, we have something so they could put the fertilizer.
Yeah, yeah. So the other aspect of, you know, what we've been doing with water is also the nitrogen management. And like I said, there's a lot of nitrate in the irrigation water we want to take into account. And then residual nitrogen or mineral nitrogen in the soil, we try to evaluate that before fertilizing. And Jorge, he uses the crop manager to give him recommendations, right?
Yes.
You've been doing it on lettuce.
Lettuce.
And but not celery yet, huh? A little bit.
A little bit, not a lot.
Yeah. So you took some soil samples from here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, but I was coming fast and I did a return.
Oh, did they fall?
Yeah. But you will bring them.
He's going to bring them out. And so we use the soil nitrate quick test, or those quick tests I think you guys are familiar with. So dip it in to make a decision on how much nitrogen fertilizer you might need at a different stage, rather than just saying, "Yeah, put on, 20 gallons of UAN 32." Sometimes they skip it. And so what we're trying to do is take into account all the different sources of nitrogen that would go into the crop. The water, nitrogen in the soil that's already there, and then also anticipate mineralization that might happen. And that's where we use the crop manager to do all those calculations, because instantly they can see that.
So Michael is part of he's a big part of some big projects in improving irrigation management efficiency. How close is this? I mean, the management that you've helped instill in this field together here. How does this compare with 10 years ago or other standard systems here? How close to really fine-tuning are you right now?
Well, you know, like I was saying, like they used to use 3.5, 4 feet of water, and then we get it down to less than 2 feet. So that's a big savings in water, right? And that means we have a lot less leaching of nitrogen. So, but you know, we can demonstrate on a field here and a field there, but really you're not having an impact until the crew that does all this is a believer. And that's where Jorge is so important, you know, because he works on a day-to-day basis, and that's the only way these, you know, medium to large vegetable operations are going to change. They have to hire the right personnel. So all of you might have a job in the future doing something like this to guide these guys. Now Jorge, fluent Spanish speaker, so that's really good because most of these guys are Spanish speakers. But actually, you know, a lot of the young guys that you guys have been hiring, they're bilingual.
Yes.
And every time I speak Spanish with them, they answer in English because my Spanish isn't that good. But you know, as we get a more educated workforce, it's going to help too. And that's a big factor.
Any questions that people have of these two guys here about this? Yeah.
Oh, I just want to ask, is this going to serve the water for the whole field? This only.
This valve here?
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
We have like different valves.
yeah.
We have like different valves. It depends on the field. For example, there's one over there. They probably, like, sometimes they do is they use one valve in 2 fields. So they use a lay flat, the lay flat, like going that way, and it will water that way. And then they use a lay flat over here, and it's going to water.
So how large the field it can, like, this one thing can serve water to? Like the size of the field?
Probably, you know, it's probably 10 to 14 acres, you know, you can irrigate. So typically, these flow rates are going to be 500-600 gallons a minute with the drip system, depending on the application rate.
All right, so you guys help the class out here. This uniform field of celery, how many acres is this?
From
I can look.
From that blue lay flag, the flag, could you see the blue flag?
Yep.
From out here is 9 acres and 0.36, and maybe the other one is like 6 acres.
Okay, you got a field then? All right. All right, we're going to probably follow these guys to the next stop here, and then, right? Or do
Yeah.
you have time to stay or not?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we're going to go to the equipment yard.
So you can see our new trailer.
Yeah, and I'll tell you how much water we've put on here so far. Let's see. I have to turn it this way.
Before he says that, how much would you think they might have put on? From what you've heard already this morning, you know that this is a late summer crop. Any feel for how much water could have gone into this field? What's your impression? Just, Catherine? Sidif?
Like when, Jeff? Like the whole growing season, or just?
Well, no, right up to
to-
right now. From what did you say, August 6th to today? I'm just trying to get you familiarity here now, rather than him just tell us. No ballpark field. Dexter, what do you think?
inches,
30 what?
16 inches.
15 inches. Michael, what do you got?
We got, since we started recording, 16.
Oh my goodness.
Pretty good. Yeah. But there was another probably 5 inches put on
Okay.
earlier for establishment, because we came in after establishment.
All right,
But
okay.
so it's a little higher than we would like, because we haven't been telling them every day this is how much you should put on. But we're just seeing, have they learned anything? You know, and I would say, you know, this is a lot better than what we used to see. I mean, right now it'd be like 3 feet.
Because back then, didn't they used to water like 24 hours?
Yeah,
24 hours, just one irrigation.
yeah.
And let it sit like for a week, maybe.
Yeah.
And another irrigation for 24 hours.
When you say back then, like how many years ago was that?
Like
Like
2 years.
2 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.